Good
Right.
evening, everyone. I want to remind everyone, please mute yourself as you enter so we have good quality of this session. Today, ambitiously, we want to focus in one of the applications related with the last, um, let's say, last module in Data 650, which is AI, cognitive analytics, and how it fit in the big picture of big data. So, and we selected in this realm, let's say, the easier application, which is the simplest application of AI in cognitive, and which is actually the hype today. You can see the chatbots are all over. Before it was web interface, mobile interface, and today we live already is imposing the chatbot interface, the digital interface with um, in all area of our life. So we very briefly will touch about chatbots. There is nothing complicated there as a concept because it has existed for many years, just has advanced with the technology more towards what we want the chatbots to be. And then we are going to go to the practical part of the what is the assignment, and Elena is going to walk you through all the key points which are not explicitly to find directly in the readings and in the walkthrough. So you have to perform all the walkthrough and reading in the classroom and listen to this presentation to get the whole picture. And the aim of this session is actually to make your life easier, not to learn the hard way how to build a chatbot. So this is in general the agenda for today. We are going to talk specifically what are the requirements for assignment 4. And remember, this is the last assignment of the class. We have just 2 weeks remaining. The semester has passed so fast. I can't believe we are almost at the end. And as you understand, at the end, there are not possible extension. This is just right a rule written on stone, let's put it this way. Not from the class, not from the program, is from the dean office. Is rule written on stone. Everything has to be ended when the semester ends. And it's not just because this is a capricious decision. The thing it involves question about tuition, about people getting tuition reimbursement, and it has to be this way. It's not just one person situation, it's the whole picture. So I just want to remind this very quickly. So about the chatbots, everyone knows already what are the chatbots. We have in our life today experiencing many of them. And if we try to define them formally, we have to say that this is a software digital interface interacting is a system which very basically understands the language, natural language, and of course, in order to maintain a conversation with the user, it must have some understanding of the language and intelligence, because at the end of the day, this conversation in certain context with the user should solve certain problem, should be useful for the user for some purpose. So that in this conversation, this software try to by questioning the user to understand what is the intent, what the user wants. And we are talking about all chatbots, at least the state of the art today, they are for certain context. We are not talking about chatbots for general purpose. Each of them are working for certain context, and basically they are based in the advancement of cognitive computing. All this idea of cognitive, which is the natural language processing, and actually the chatbot gained this popularity today because with the advancement of the natural language understanding and cognitive computing, they can act as more intelligent agent and actually solve problem which is of value from the user. And that is the reason they are so wide and getting wider application in any area of our life. I just want to mention that we can refer to chatbot in case as a digital assistant, digital agent. Now, if you see just a bot, that is a more general term, and it doesn't have to be conversational. It can just act based on some trigger, on some rule, and it doesn't have to perform what is the conversational part, which is one of the key part of the chatbot. So I highlighted, I tried to parse what is the definition of the chatbot, what we expect today as a user and from the chatbot, and these are the main components. And of course, since we are talking about natural language understanding, this is the match in this part of the course, which is where we are paying close attention to the use of natural language understanding in different problem of data analytic and improving user satisfaction. So I have just very briefly here 3 different chatbot use case. You can have thousands of them because starting chatbot can interact in writing or in by voice speech. For instance, everyone is familiar with voice interaction chatbot, which are Alexa, Siri, and of course they rely under the same definition we talk. The conversation can be in writing, can be in speech. And the advancement of speech to text has advanced so much that it makes no difference in which form the interaction is. The most important thing today we expect from the chatbots is that during this interaction, this software agent, this digital agent understand the user. And understand the user means not only understand the English in the context, but also has the knowledge which will give some intelligence solution. So the intent of the user, the information the user is using, the assistance the user is using, the chatbot can provide. So all these components and toward some of these application use case I have in the screen. And summarize in this slide, you can see what are the major part of chatbots to be so extensively used today is the business benefits. What is the benefits? And they are summarized very nicely here in graphical form. It's not only to improve user experience, but also personalized services, integration of different services. Think about that chatbot can be integrated with different other services and to have an application which usually you can go beyond this user interface satisfaction. You can go and solve even a broader problem for the enterprise. Very important is until very recently, since how the state of the art of today I'm talking about of chatbot has reached this point. Like anything today which is related with technology, by one hand is the user which likes something and demands something, and by the other hand is the technology has advanced and is capable to provide a solution, technological solution, which is cost effective. And this is the stage of chatbots today, because users, since the messenger of Facebook everyone likes this messenger. That was shown that even people like more Messenger than Facebook itself, like a social network. So Messenger is like something which user demand, and on the other hand, natural language processing, understanding, and cognitive has come to some free to a point which can provide, let's say, a cost-effective solution. All these packages available in the cloud are very inexpensive, and we are talking about not just like these two use case I had in the three use case in the previous slide about company of certain size can afford this type of services. The price today of software which can support development of chatbot very cost effective is affordable even for single, let's say, not for only for small business but also for single owner business. The price has reached this point, and of course the expectation from the chatbots has advanced. Here I have a slide which is from 2016. What are the expected benefits of the chatbots? And you understand what is in the bottom in blue, almost dark blue, is what is not so expected from the chatbot. But think about that, that was in 2016. Of course, the most repetitive task, which is the benefits of 24-hour service, quickly have answer to a simple question, which is benefits to the user and to the business. All these four on the top, they are the easier thing to achieve with chatbots. Today, with the advancement, just 2 years after this graphic produced, the expected benefits from the chatbot are going down in this graphic. What that means? Already, customers expect also easier communication, a higher percentage, even getting more detail, expert answer is going up. So as we advance, all these expectations are growing because the chatbots today with the technology are capable to satisfy this user requirement. So this is very in general about chatbots. You can read more. They are some reading in the classroom. Most important purpose today is to walk you through to all the how to connect all the dots. And if you carefully review everything we have, it's gonna be not so so difficult for you to do it, because it's mostly to learn to use a service, not to code in Python, to learn a service which is going without coding to permit you to build intelligent chatbot based on cognitive services. But of course, you will have to learn something to deal with new way, not the usual way, and you will have to follow everything strictly. So with no more, I'm going to give the presentation right to Elena, who is going to walk you through all these specific details, which are very important for the completion of assignment 4. Of course, you have first to do the required walkthrough, self-assessment, and please do the way it is suggested in the classroom. Even though you don't have to submit the walkthrough, do it. Otherwise, you will get the hard way, you will finish and maybe get frustrated with something which is not so difficult. So, Elena, you can continue.
Yes. And also the walkthrough has ungraded exercises, but you have to do them because the instructions on the next page build on the exercise. So, all right. So this is basically the summary of what the chatbot is, right? So I'm gonna skip that because Elena already discussed this part. All right. So this is just a big picture. This is what's gonna happen. You're an end user, And you are going to, in general, well, you're not going to, for this assignment, you're not going to deploy the chatbot, but in reality, you would be interacting with the chatbot through an interface, and you have your chatbot implemented somewhere by using the conversation service, right? Watson Assistant, form a conversation, and you have your other services, right? So that's your application. And in reality, you would probably store the information in a database, right? Because somehow you have to train the bot from somewhere it has to pull the information, right? In this class, for the purpose of this course, you're not going to use database. All right? So here are the high-level steps of what you need to do. You start by defining an application purpose. Then you have to define the specific scenarios, right? Then you're going to go to the Watson Assistant on IBM Cloud and you're going to implement your chatbot. You're going to train it, and it's going to be test, a lot of testing. You make one change, you have to retest everything. A single change, retest the whole flow of the conversation. This piece right here, number 5 and number 6, you're actually not going to physically do it, but you would have to discuss how you would have done it. How would you use other services in a cloud to enhance the application, right? And you're not going to deploy, but you would discuss what platform you would have used if you were going to deploy it. And this is a key part here too. Once you have your chatbot deployed, Watson Assistant allows you to monitor the conversation, right? Now here, you'll also need to identify the limitations of your current application, and you're going to suggest the enhancements for the next release. So what application are we talking about here? In this case, I'm creating the little health chatbot application. So the application has several purposes. The first purpose is that you can the user can estimate the body mass index. BMI stands for body mass index. You're gonna enter the height in inches and the weight in pounds, and the chatbot is gonna give you your estimated body mass index percentage and which category you fall under. Is it underweight, or if you're overweight, or if it's just right? So basically, another purpose is the blood pressure. So you enter your blood pressure readings, systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and the chatbot is going to tell you if you're in a normal range, or if you're in a high range, or if you need to go to emergency right away. You don't need to call a doctor unless your reading requires medical attention. And you can use the application 24/7, and it's 100% free. You don't need to have the health insurance, and anything you enter is confidential. Then it's consistent. So, for example, if Yelena enters the blood pressure 115/75, the blood pressure is normal. And if Lanesh enters the same blood pressure, the chatbot is going to say normal, right? So that's what I mean by consistent. All right, so let's continue. So here are some scenarios in details. So this is a doctor practice. I'm going to have 3 doctors who work different shifts. I have a Mr. Monitor, Mr. Stethoscope, and Mr. BMI. So those are the hours that they work on, right? So whenever I start my chatbot, I want my greeting message to be different, depending on which doctor is currently on shift. So somehow I have to check the date, right? Somehow I have to check the current time. Then I want to display this menu right here. How can I help you? I can estimate BMI, I can explain what the BMI is, I can ask the bot to explain my blood pressure reading, I can ask what blood pressure is, and this one is, suppose that I want the information to be emailed to me. So there is an option for me to provide an email, right? And let's just pretend that the email will be sent. Well, instead of actually sending an email, you're going to see a message that an email will be sent to whatever address you specified shortly. And then I want to exit, but I want my exit message to be slightly different depending on a weekday, Okay. All right. So here I'm just elaborating what my scenarios are, and this is what you will have to do. You will have to explain it in your write-up for your assignment. Right? You have to explain what the scenarios are. So the user selects the estimate BMI option, and then the chatbot will prompt to enter the height in inches and the weight in pounds. If your input does not contain the number, you'll be asked to re-enter, right? But what does the number mean? The number, you can enter it as in digital format, 65, or you can spell it 65, it will still be recognized. Or you can say, I am 65 inches tall. It's just an example, and the bot's supposed to pick up 65, right? Or if I say I weigh around 120 pounds, it should pick up, right? And then the application will calculate the BMI and inform you which range you fall under. Also, this is another scenario about the blood pressure. You would have to enter a number, right? So somehow I have to have a way to verify that whatever is entered contains a number, and the number can be, again, it can be a number, it can be spelled out like 65, right? Just an example. Or I can say, for instance, my lower region is 70. Okay? So now, based on the readings, it's going to tell me what's happening. But this is what I want to happen is, you may have heard about the condition hypertensive crisis. So if either the systolic region is above 180, or diastolic, right, lower region is 120, I want the conversation to stop, and I want the patient to be advised to call the doctor immediately. Similarly, if the blood pressure reading is below 65 or 45, right, there is a risk of hypertension, so I want the application to stop, and the user should be referred to the emergency. This is what I want to happen, right? So think about it. In your mind, think about it. You have some ifs, right? You have some conditional responses. Then, this is another couple scenarios. If I ask what BMI is, right, I can enter what BMI is, or I can select it from the menu, and then the board is supposed to present the definition and a picture. So we have another concept here, image type of response. Right? And similarly, with the blood pressure, if I ask a question, I want to see this chart right here. And after that, important, after that, I want to return to the menu. Right? Because if I ask what the blood pressure is, do I want the chatbot to quit on me? No. Right? So think about it. You have to think about the details. And this one is about the email. If I select email me the information, I have to enter valid email address, or I should rather enter the text that contains a valid email address. And the bot's supposed to parse it, right? Somehow it's supposed to recognize, right? And if there is no email, the bot should prompt me to enter the correct email. So think about the concepts, right? You're gonna do something similar. It's a flow diagram, and you have to do it for your chatbot, right? So this is basically how it works. When the user signs in, right? The user logs in, he or she will be welcomed by the doctor on duty. And then here, this block is here, it determines what the selection is. And based on what the selection, it takes a pass here. Like, for example, if it's a blood pressure, it goes here. And at the very end, it could take two actions. It could either send you to goodbye, right, if you're in danger, or it can send you back to here, to the menu, right? This is what's supposed to happen. This is just the plan. And here, well, you may notice that I repeated the goodbye block. Well, it's because the diagram is too cluttered. But this is what I want to happen. I don't want to quit. I want the user to have an opportunity to continue, right? Different menu options. So now, what I'm gonna do next? Now I have to implement it, right? I'm going to go to my Watson Assistant service, and I'm going to create a workspace. Workspace is a set of conversation elements. So I have an intent, right? And I have an entity, and I have my dialogue, and I also have something called a context. But let me explain the thing in the details. Here, this is how the workspace looks like, empty workspace. And I'm going to get into an application, but I first wanted to make sure everybody is familiar with the concept. So this is a workspace. Notice that I have several tabs in here. Intents, entities, dialogue, and this is the catalog. So what catalog is that it contains some pre-built intents that you may reuse in your application. You may just browse through and add them. And you can just look at it. You can just look at it, right? This is basically reuse, right? You can reuse some intents from the catalog, only intents. Now, let's continue. What is intent? Intent is a specific purpose in a conversation. For example, I want to estimate the BMI, right? I want the bot to explain what the BMI is. I want the bot to tell me what my blood pressure means. I want to explain what the blood pressure is, right? So the intent is here, explain me something, email me the information. So this is an intent, right? Entity is a specific contents, like explain what? Explain what the blood pressure is, explain what the BMI is, right? So the concept that I want to be explained, it has to be an entity, right? You want to have the intents more generic because you want it to be easily distinguished what the user actually wants, right? And something else to keep in mind, that if I say I want to estimate the BMI, someone else, like for example Lanesh, he could say something like, I want to calculate my body mass index, right? So the same request could be phrased differently. So that's where we have something called example, right? We're going to have example because the same intent can be expressed differently, right? So, and this is entity, right? Because for entity, I have to specify exactly what I want to be explained. I want to explain what the blood pressure is, or I wanted to explain what BMI is, right? And there is also patterns. And I wanted to emphasize how to use the pattern, right? And then the dialogue. Dialogue is basically the flow of your conversation, right? And the content catalog, this is not applicable to specific conversations, but this is something that's in there for you to use, right? If you want to, but if you don't need to, don't. Okay, so now let me start sharing the screen. Share, and I would be going a little bit back and forth between slides, but I have a copy of the slides on my hard drive. So there we go. So what I did was, this is the application, this is how it looks like. Okay. So here am I, this is a set of workspaces that I have, and you are limited, you can have up to 5 workspaces in the same instance. So this is my health center that I built, and my workspace, it has a name and it has a description, right? And then when I click here, I can go to view details, and it's going to tell me the number of intents, number of entities, and number of nodes. Yeah. Okay. So now here, if you wanted to edit the description, you would have to just click on edit, right? You would have to click on edit. Let's click done. Danger zone, danger zone. If you delete something, you cannot undo it. So try not to delete, or at least before you delete something, you want to make a backup, download a JSON file. Yes, speaking of the JSON file, this is very important. When you turn in the chatbot that you develop for grading, you have to submit this JSON file. That's where you download it. You click on download, and it's supposed to save it, right? It's going to put it in your downloads folder. So take this file and attach, because when your work will be graded, the file will be imported. And your chatbot will actually be tested in a Watson conversation. That's part of the grading of the assignment. So here it is. This is what I created, right? and this is what I would have submitted for grading, and then the instructor would have imported the JSON file. So this is what the instructor would do. The instructor would do this. Look, import, right? And then the instructor would choose this file, right? I do this, and then the instructor would select everything, right? I'm going to cancel out, but this is how your work would be graded. Your instructor would import the file that you submitted, okay? Now, let's return to our chatbot. So, you can create the entities manually, right? Intents and entities manually, or you import them from the file. And the reason you import them from the file, it's a reuse, right? You want to reuse. That way, sometimes you create a bunch of entities and you can reuse them in other chatbots that you develop. And like here, see this is a catalog, and here is a general set of entities. And if you're working on an application that has something similar, you can just import if you want. But, well, only import if you have to, because there is a limit on number of intents, I believe, that you can have. Okay, so let's go back. Intent. So intent is what I want to do. And I can go here and I can do enter an intent manually. And as it says in the slide, I just specify the name and I specify a bunch of example, right? An example is basically the same way to an example is the same way to express an intent, right? So here it is. I would enter the BMI, and then I would put other ways to estimate BMI. So this is something similar to what's in your walkthrough, but it's a different health application, right? And then what I'm doing here, I have a CSV file with two columns. Column A is an example, and the column B is an intent, and column A is an example of the intent in column B, right? And I just import this. And when I imported that, this is what I have. This is what I have, right? So these are my intents, and this is the intent description. Well, actually, what I did was the intent description was not in a CSV file. I just went in and I typed it. See, this is my intent. I can just go in and add the description. And if I wanted to, I could add more examples, right? I could add more examples. Like, for example, see this, I have email, I have, may I have a copy, or I have something like a send more information. This is an example. It's another way to express something, right? To express the same need. Now here we have entities, and what I did was, here you have several ways you can create. See this topic, right? I created a topic, and the topic has two values, because I have a blood pressure topic and I have a BMI topic, right? So here I specify my value, which is the blood pressure, and then I specify a bunch of synonyms. So now let's talk about what's not in your walkthrough. It's a new feature here, show recommendations. So as I enter a new entity in here, I can click on show recommendations and I will get a list of synonyms, right? But this functionality is also available for what I already created. Like, for example, look at this blood pressure, right? I can edit blood pressure. If I click here, right, I edit it. Here I can add, see this blood pressure, I can add more synonyms, but see this little icon here? If I look at this, here, Watson Assistant gives me a set of recommendations that I might be interested in. See this? Like, for example, I could select this, right? This is a measure, right? This is a way to, unit of measure for the blood pressure. Then I can select this, hypertensiveness, and I can do add selected, right? So that's just giving me more. Well, basically, this is a synonym for the blood pressure, right? because you never know how your user can express the question. And so this is another set. What I could do here, I could click on next set and keep on clicking next set just to browse through available synonyms. So just keep this in mind, that this is something you could do, right? Okay, so this available for the new values or for existing values that you already have. Now let me close this out. So remember that for the entities, you can key in manually, or you can also import them from the file. And I did not need to click on the save button, it saved it for me. See this here? You can import this from the file, and this is part of it's in the walkthrough that you are going to do. It explains you how to add from the file. But I'm going to show you something else. How do we capture an email? We have to create an entity called an email. But watch what I did. In here, I added a value, valid email, but take a look at this. Instead of synonym, I selected pattern. See this? Here is a drop down. When you enter the value, here you can select pattern. This is a regular expression, right? So here, I'm trying to tell the chatbot to match the email address. So email address basically starts, in the beginning you have the letters and numbers, right? Then that piece is followed by the @%, and then here you have another piece where it would be a combination of numbers and letters, and then you've got the dot something, right? So basically that's a regular expression. And also in the slides I put an expression for the telephone number for you, right? So that's a matter of reading the documentation, but this is how you do this. In order to match the email from the input, you have to add an expression entity. And the value is valid email, and I selected pattern. Very important, you could have more than one expression here. Like for example, if this was a telephone number, you could have the local phone number, right? United States phone number, or you could have an international phone number. Then you could have two values, two expressions. You can have up to 5. And another important that you can have either expression or synonym, but you cannot have both. You cannot have both in the same value. Okay? In the same value of an entity cannot have both. You can have either synonym or expression, but not both. Okay, so now let's break down what else I have. I created my entities and I created my intents, right? So now what I have to do is I do the dialog. But when I created the new dialog, I had only 2 nodes. Oh, wait a minute, that's not all. That's not all. I'm not done yet. I have to go back, look at this. I'm on entities. There are 2 entity types, right? So there is something called my entities. Those are the entities that I create. There is also something called system entities. Those are pre-built, okay? They're available for me to use, but I cannot edit them. In my example, I'm going to use dates, I'm going to use number, and I'm going to use time. So what I had to do was I had to turn them on, right? I'm going to use date because I wanted to pull the current day of the week. I want my goodbye response to be different based on the day. Then I have to get the current time because I have 3 doctors who work on a shift, on different shifts. So the doctor that greets you depends on the time. So after this session, you will get this JSON file, and go ahead and import it and run this tomorrow morning, and you will see that the welcome message in the morning will be different from the welcome message that you see tonight. Okay? So I have to have date and time, and I have to have the number because, in other words, I need to be able to pull the number from my input. Okay? So now this is what I'm going to do. I turn this 3 on. Now I'm ready to build the dialog. This is an end product, right? This is an end product and what I'm going to have. But I have to break it down because that's not how I started. So here, this is a summary for you, the difference between the my entities and system entities, right? These are the three that I'm going to use. Okay? Now, this one I'm showing you what I did to turn them on. Okay? So here, I'm just showing you some examples what I could do with dates. Now returns the current time, right? So, to determine if now is before 10 a.m., this is what you do. Now, before, and this will pick up one before 10 a.m., right? Before. That's how you take the before checks if the specified time, right? If the current time falls before the specified time, that's going to be before midnight and 10 a.m., right? Here, this one is going to be, it's 5 p.m. This is a military time. So that's 5 p.m., right? And this is checking if now is after 5, right? It will make sense when we start looking at what it's doing in the application. Here, now, reformat date time, this one will pull the date of the week spelled out. So today is Tuesday, right? It's going to pull Tuesday. This one will pull the 3-letter abbreviation, and this will pull the index of a day number. So today it's going to be 2, right? So in this example, I'm going to be using this one, right? This one. Because I want my message in a goodbye note to be different based on what day it is. If it's a weekend, it should say have a nice weekend. But if it's a Tuesday, for instance, it should say have a nice Tuesday. That's what I want. So here, this one I'm just showing you how to add entities manually, right? So this is still on entities. And here I just put an example of how to use this recommendation. And in this screenshot, I'm showing you how to use the recommendation for a brand new entity, right? But you can also use it for the existing values if you want to add more, right? And here, just by importing the file, so I can skip this. And I wrote down what to do for the email. This is a pattern for the email. Okay? So now I'm ready to start to build my dialog. And a dialog is nothing but a collection of nodes. So when you start, this is what you see. When you start, you're going to have 2 nodes. Welcome node is triggered when the conversation starts. And anything else node is triggered when your input is not recognized. Like, for example, if I type elephant, it's going to go, huh? Beg your pardon? What was that? Can you repeat your question? Something like that, right? So I have to have a way to welcome the user and to handle when the input is not recognized, right? And I have to handle it in several places, and I'll show you what I mean. But this one is when you start, right? When you enter something that's not handled by the bot, it has to let the user know. But here, there is some concept, because the chatbot consists of nodes, and I put the nodes at the same level. I call the sibling nodes. Then a parent node can have more than one child node, right? The child, it sits under the parent. You can have this hierarchy. So your child node, for the child node to be executed, your parent node has to be true, right? In this case, what I'm doing is that I have a welcome message in the parent node, and then in the child node, I display the menu. The menu is displayed in the child node. That's how I decided to do it. It's because in my other branches, where I'm doing the email and BMI, at the end, I jump to that node, right? So I have a condition, what to do next. And I wanted to go to this child node. Well, there is more than one way to do it, but it takes a little bit of tweaking back and forth, right? So, for the node to be checked, your parent condition must be met, right? And then it's going to check the child condition, right? Now, if email me condition is true, my dialog is not going to check the nodes below this. So the order of nodes matters, because if my condition on the second node is met, I'm not going to go check the third node, right? So sometimes there will be cases when it matters. Okay. Now let's continue. Here are the node elements. Every node has a condition. What is condition? It's an intent, and it's an entity, right? And you can combine. So for example, take a look at this. So this is my tree here, right? So email me. When does this node get triggered? This email, this node is triggered when an intent is to email me. Okay? In this case, there is no entity, just to email me. Here, estimate BMI, this is just triggered by intent called BMI. But on the other hand, and this is a folder, by the way, okay? This is a folder. You can group nodes with related purpose in a folder. And to add the folder, see this? Here, this is add folder. You add folder and then you move nodes in a folder. So see this, let's see when this guy is triggered. This guy is triggered when I have an explain intent and when I have a topic BMI. So see this is an intent and this is an entity, okay? BMI is an entity value. Topic is an entity and BMI is a value, okay? I'm just telling you what the condition means here. So response. Response is the information that displayed to a user, and there are several types of responses. You have a text, option, pause, and image. Like when I start this running this chatbot, right? So this is how you test it. You click on try it out. Take a look at what's going to happen. So here, this is my text response, right? And this is a guy says, good evening, I'm Mr. BMI calculator, and this is a picture, right? So this is an image type of response, and this is an option type of response. You have three types, right? Text, image, and this is option. So how is this configured? If I go to the welcome node, here, what I had to do is I had to click on a customize, and I have to enable multiple responses because I want my message to be different based on the time. So what I did here, look at this. I said if now after 5 p.m., so this is going to do if it's between 5 p.m. and midnight, I want to do this. And let's click on a gear. Let's see what I wanted to do. I have two responses here, right? I have a text response. And again, each response have variations. So if I run my chatbot again, maybe I'll see the different wording, right? I may see the different wording. So this is a text, right? This is an image. And here you have to specify the source on the web. This is the image source on the web, right? So you just go in, you find a picture, right? Click on it, and you get the URL. To test if it's working, you just take this, you just copy this URL, and you paste it in a browser. This is how you make sure that the picture has a valid URL, right? Because sometimes when you try to configure it, you might be getting an error. So you want to verify that you're getting the right URL. Okay? So this is what it's doing. Now take a look at this. And finally, it tells what to do next. And I want to jump to the response in the in this node here. I'm going next. I want to go here. This is my child node, right? And I added it as a child node. But here I'm doing few things here. Let's forget about the context for a while. So here I'm going to see here, well, basically what it says, condition equals true. Well, true usually the node will be executed at all times. This is a special condition, true, right? So if the welcome node, if the parent node is true, it goes through the parent node and then it goes to the child. This is an option. The response type is option. So what it really means is that the value is the text that if I just type in the text in here, if I type in BMI, what would have been triggered? So the values that I enter here should trigger the node that would have been triggered if I type this. So if I type explain BMI, what would be triggered? This, right? This is what would be triggered if I typed explain BMI. Hence, I want the value of explain BMI option to be this, right? So the value is a phrase that triggers the corresponding node to kick in. The label is what is displayed in the menu, right? And I have several options. I can click on a menu, or I can type in what I want, right? So I give an options. But without this, I probably would be confused. I wouldn't know what to type. So that's what it is, right? And I'm using more images. So this, how did I get this? It's because I specified to return to this menu, right? So what I did was I have a folder in here, and folder, let's scroll down. Folder enables grouping the nodes that have the same purpose, and you can also apply the customization. You can apply some properties, and then the nodes in the folder will inherit it. Like here, well, this is basically the digression. Digression specifies that if you're able to jump to this location in the conversation from another node, right? And what I could also do is here, this folder itself is triggered when the intent is explained, but each individual node is also triggered by the entity value, VMI. I could actually take out the explain and it should still work, because this thing is triggered by the intent explain, and this guy's right here triggered by, this is the value of an entity topic, BMI, and this one is the blood pressure. Now, I have parentheses because if my value contains the space, I have to put it in parentheses, right? And entity itself cannot contain spaces. Value, yes, but you have to put parentheses. Here, this is an explanation, and this is an image. Well, is this what you saw? No, you saw the body mass index, but let's see. Let's do the blood pressure. What is the blood pressure? And this is supposed to display this chart in here, and this explanation, right? So that piece should make sense now, right? I'm doing something else in here, and this is called the context. In this menu, I'm pulling this date. See, this is a variable, and to open this, there is more than one way to do this. See this? In here, in the response, I'm going to do open context variable. So this is a variable day, and I'm just pulling it out here. What this means is, see this, I put in quotes. Here, this piece means that I am extracting the value. I'm taking the current date and I'm extracting the day and storing it into the day variable, right? So when you go in here, manage context, this will show you that it pulled the date correctly. See this? Tuesday. Where does it come from? I'm defining it in here. Later, I will use it in a exit, in a goodbye node, right? I will use this date, use this day of the week. Now, I'm sorry, what was that? Did anyone say something? Let me see the chat. No? Okay. I thought somebody said something to me. Okay. Now, let's see. Let's get to the BMI part. So let's close this out, and I'm going to say, what is no, I want to do what is my BMI, right? So, oops. Okay. So let's clear this. Let's clear it. Let's start all over. Okay. So I want to see what is BMI. I want to select estimate BMI, right? Estimate BMI. Sorry. So uh, now the chatbot is asking me about my weight, right? And let's suppose that I type Yelena. What's gonna happen? It's asking me to enter my height in inches, right? So I'm gonna put my height in inches. Now, well, it shows irrelevant, but take a look at this. What is this sys number? This is what? The system entity number. This is how it knows that it's a number, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Now it's asking me how many pounds do I weigh. And I'm going just to type this, right? This is my weight, approximately. And it's going to tell me my BMI, and it tells me that I have a healthy weight. Now here, there is a little unintentional error. I didn't specify what to do next. I wanted to display the menu, right? But for some reason, I may have left it out somehow. But I can still do this. What is my blood pressure? Aha, see this? It recognizes. So now, if you look at it, where am I? I'm going to in here, blood pressure readings. At the same time as you're testing it, I want you to pay attention to this context. So see this? Now it has weight and it has height, and it also has a time zone, right? Very important. When you're testing this application, keep in mind that Yelena, me, I'm in the Eastern time zone. So this is my time zone. When you test it, it's going to be your time zone, okay? Now, it's asking me to enter the systolic blood pressure, right? And I'm just going to put 115 over 75. So this is the normal blood pressure, right? So I'm good. Now, what I did was, here I put a different menu. Well, since I already looked at my blood pressure, I want to do something different, right? But to do that, I did something crazy. I'll show you what I did. I put this menu here. I put a separate note in here. Here, I put a separate note with a different menu. Okay? In theory, if you want to be more advanced, and if it's possible, sometimes you want to have a way to check which nodes you visited. So for instance, if you visited this estimate BMI, perhaps you don't want to have this option again in the menu. Well, it's just a thought. It's just something for a thought. Right? But let's see how I implemented this. See this here, estimate my BMI. Okay, so this is called a slot. A slot is used to handle collecting information and storing it in a context variable. So, what I'm doing in here, first of all, I had to click on Customize, and I had to turn on the slide. I had to enable it, right? Okay, and let's not prompt for everything for right now, because this will be more advanced. I'm not getting in there, okay? So, you have to enable the slot, and what I'm doing in here is that I'm going to check for a number in the input. And if the number is not found, it's going to ask what's your height in inches. And to make it easier, I can just click on this gear and enter it here. What found does is that sometimes you want to repeat what the user said. You want to paraphrase, right? So that's what it's for, but I'm not doing it. Now here, you have another one, system number, right? This is system number, and it's also trying to catch the number of pounds. At any time, I should have a capability to exit the conversation. I could type exit. So this is what I have, manage handlers. And if I say goodbye, it should be able to let me exit, right? Or if I say explain, I should be able to see the explanation. No, just an example. Okay? So anyhow, the whole idea is that I should not be stuck in here all day. Another option I have is that if I entered the wrong height, the invalid height, 5 times in a row, I should be able to quit, perhaps, right? So you could add some kind of like a counter, and on each attempt you can add 1 to a counter. If the count is 5, then you could exit, right? Well, it's just something to think about for your assignment. So here, this is what I'm doing. This is a conditional response. Well, unfortunately, I'm calculating it. So this is a calculation, right? Let's go in here. Let's click on here. Let me show you details here. So here, I'm trying to say that this is a what is it doing? This is a body mass index, right? So I'm trying to say if your BMI is too high, right? Oh, this is underweight. So I'm trying to say if you're very, very, very underweight, you have to see the doctor. This is not good, right? And it's gonna exit the conversation. But this is what I'm doing here. This is if both recognizes. Notice this is a calculation, right? So this is a variable, right? And I'm multiplying it by 703, and then I'm dividing it by square root of the height, and I'm checking if it's less than this here, right? But it's above 0. So this is what I'm doing here. Here, this is a response. In order to display the actual value of this, you have to do this. Less than, and then a question mark, and then here is a question mark and a greater than. You have to have this, right? And then here is the rest of the text, right? So, if you are in real danger, we have to exit the conversation, and you have to, yeah. Otherwise, we have to go back to the menu. You may continue using the application. Anything else means that if neither of this is recognized, I need to handle it. I have to say, sorry, I didn't receive sufficient information to estimate your BMI, right? And we have something along this line in the blood pressure. But I have to specify what to do next, right? Like see this one could be dangerous. You could see if your blood pressure is very, very low, you have to see the doctor immediately. This range is, well, if you have no other symptoms, you might be fine. But here, this is life-threatening if you have the hypertensive crisis. So you have to exit the conversation and immediately go to the doctor, right? Immediately. Just no more conversation, no more. It's goodbye, right? So now there is another option here that I should show you how to do email. This is important. Email is an entity, right? Do you remember what I did? I created an entity right here. I have an entity that I created, and it's a pattern, and I made it uppercase for a reason, because you have email entity and you have email variable. You have to store the email in a context variable. So what I'm doing here, let's go back to the dialog node and email me. Where is it? Okay, here it is. See this email me. I have a slot and I'm trying to check for email. So what this will really do is it will check if if the content of what I enter contains an email. And if not, it's going to ask to enter the valid email address. And here, this is how you do, this is a context section, right? You may have to edit this. You may have to edit, because by default, I think it was not picking up this piece here. So I had to add this. Because what you're doing basically is that you're trying to read the value from the input. It has to be like this. You have to have email dot literal, because you are reading, you're not reading the expression. You are actually reading the value pulled by expression. So I had to show you this. This is important. So this is a context. You may have to update this manually. So let me close this. So see that this is a response. you have to click on this here, ellipsis, and you have two ways to do it. One way is to edit the context here, right? Close. Another way is to edit this here, JSON editor. This is a piece. This piece here, this is where this variable is set. Very important, if you edit this at this code level, all indentation has to match. All characters have to match, okay? Because if the indentation is incorrect, you're gonna get an error. And if there is an error, you cannot save the changes. Like, see this, let me do this on purpose. Well, now it's fine. But if I was going to delete this quote, oops, if I was going to delete this, see, this is an error. So if you see something like this an error, it's a problem, right? It's an invalid. You cannot even save your changes. So you have to check all of the quotes. Make sure that each opening quote has a matching closing quote. And also do not type this part in Word, because it errors out on the Microsoft Word quote. I typed something, I was testing something, and I ended up copying the wrong quote. I ended up copying something from Word, and it cost me 1 hour of figuring out what was going on, okay? So, and here, let's close this content editor, close this JSON editor rather. And in here, take a look at this. This is how you include this as part of the response. You put a $sign, and this is the variable. So let's do this. Let's do this. Email the information, and I'm gonna say contact me. Oh, it remembered this. See this? I put contact me at, and I put my UMUC email here. And watch what happens. It says, thank you. The information about BMI and blood pressure will be sent to your email, and this is my email shortly. Do you see that? My email was parsed from the input. And if I go to message context, see this? It parsed my email address correctly. Right? So the options you have for your assignment is you can do parsing emails, you can get parsing the telephone numbers, or anything like that. It could be something like a 5-digit number. You could have a PIN number, something along the line. Be creative. Okay? So I'm going to close this out, and I'll show you the goodbye. Do you remember earlier I saved a variable called day? It's in here. This is a context variable, and I'm pulling the date, but I want the Tuesday. I don't want the 3-letter abbreviation. I wanted the actual date. So in my goodbye note, this is what I'm doing. I'm checking if today is Saturday or Sunday. I want this message. I want to say thank you for using this chatbot. Have a nice weekend. Anything else, it means any other day than Saturday and Sunday, because see here I have Saturday and Sunday. So this will display text and image that I have set up in here. Right? You would click on the gear to have it configured in here. Right? So let's do that. So I want to exit. See this? So it has been a great pleasure to assist you this Tuesday. Tuesday, see this? Please come back. Where does the Tuesday come from? This is coming from the day variable that I saved earlier. Another thing is that suppose that I start working with this application near midnight, and notice that I'm resetting this context variable every time when I hit the menu, right? So if something that I'm doing last is after midnight, then it's going to be Wednesday, right? So that's something to keep in mind based on my implementation. These are my context variables. And if the bot is doing something that you don't want to be doing, you can always debug like this. You can check what the variable is actually, right? So now let's go back. See, here I just summarized what I covered, and I put some important concepts for you, because that way you have a recording and you have it in writing, right? You want to have it in writing too. So another thing is the reason you want to have variation for the response, because you don't want your chatbot to sound like a robot. You want it more like, so to speak, like a human, right? Because the same question can be worded differently, right? So here I'm just showing you different types of the responses, right? And this is the option, and I went over, I explained to you what value is, right? Because that's basically the text that you would have typed to trigger the intent, right? And then I showed you how to work with dates. So this is a conditional response, and it's based on date. So I'm using here, I'm sort of like killing several assignment requirements in one stone, so to speak, right? Because what I'm doing here, I have I have two different response types. I have a text and an image response, right? I'm also using the system entity called date, right? So see this? It's a multi-purpose. Then in each response here, right, I'm using the paraphrasing of the welcome message. So here I have several concepts in this welcome note. In the beginning, when you just add a chatbot, the welcome note has a single response. It's a pre-built, but I can customize it. That's what I've been doing here. So then, after you implement it, you would have to do a lot of testing. In your paper, you have to do something like this. You run the scenario the way I just did it in the trial out panel, and you will explain what actually happens when you run it. You have several scenarios defined, and you have to explain what happens when the bot actually run it, right? So here, it's an explanation of what I want to see. And this is what you did not see, but if you run this application tomorrow morning, you'll be greeted by Mr. Monitor. And if you run it during the day, tomorrow you're going to be greeted by Miss Stethoscope, right? So that she works between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. So that's a time when you need to run this application, and that's a message you'll see, and that's a picture, right? Remember, we have 3 doctors in the office. And this is a configuration, how I did this, right? You're looking at this is a configuration. And now here, this is for the blood pressure, right? And this one is showing you how to extract the email. I just put the steps, right? So you will have to open the context editor and edit it. You will. For some reason, it was not doing what I wanted to be doing by default, so I had to just physically copy this thing right here. I just have to copy and paste this thing to make it work. And this is the text. See, this $sign means I'm trying to read the variable, okay? Here what I did, I put some additional expressions for you. This will read a web page. This is a United States phone, and this is a 6-digit number. Here I'm just explaining what I'm doing to get the date, right? The day of the week. I don't want this 3-letter date. I want this one. This will do the whole thing, right? This will do the whole day spelled out, not abbreviation. This is explanation on the goodbye note, what I'm doing. I say if today is Sunday or Saturday, do this message, otherwise do that, right? I initially was going to do it day by day, but when I was not sure which day we're doing the WebEx, so I just decided, okay, let's do one message for the weekend, another message for the weekday, and instead of hard coding the actual day, I want to extract the date from today's variable, and I want to display the value, right? I'm using system entity here. Folders. To do the folder, you would just basically do this. You would see this at the top. You have this option here, add folder, and then for each node that you want to place in a folder, you would just do this. Click here, and you can do the move. Right? You can do move, and then you specify where you want to move it. Right? In that case, I moved it to the folder. Okay. Now something else important. So this was the folder. Here, this is what you're going to do for your assignment. You're going to run the test scenarios that you wrote, right? You're going to run that, try it out for the scenarios that you presented in the beginning of your paper, and you're going to explain what happens actually, right? So user select estimate BMI. The bot prompts to do this, and user does that. The bot returns this, right? So you have to explain what's happening. And then you also have to explain what happens when I enter invalid input. How is that handled? Right? So for every scenario, I have to have this explanation. Oops. Here. For every scenario in the application. Right? So I'm doing about 5. Right? And Elena, she needs to learn how to spell sometimes. Okay. So here it is. What is my blood pressure? Right? Okay. Just explain what my blood pressure is. So here is a chart, right? And also I wanted to say that in your walkthrough that you have, you are getting the name from a user. In this application, I'm not. Well, the purpose is that everything is confidential. The only piece that I'm storing is the email. Because if you want the information to be emailed, then I need to have your email, right? That's all. I'm not storing your name. It's anonymous. Here, this is what happens when you email. Okay, and this is the exit conversation, right? So this is what happens when you run it on the weekend. I had to develop this bot early because I had to test what happens on the weekend, what happens on the weekday, what happens in the morning, because I'm using different messages based on the time of the day and based on the weekday. So if you're doing something like that in your assignment, you better start early. Okay, so now suppose that I implemented it and I tested it. Next step is to integrate with other services. Take a look at this. As the user, I'm entering the blood pressure 100 higher than 180 over 120, right? How does the bot make sure that I didn't make a typo? How does the bot know that I don't have a defective measure? Did I measure it right? How did I measure it? Maybe my tool is wrong. So it would be nice if we could check other symptoms. For example, how you speak, right? Because your speech should be a little bit abnormal when you're having the hypertensive crisis, and your bot should be able to pick up you wheezing, right? So there should be some kind of like a voice recognition, something like that, right? You want that. Another part in here is that when you're looking at the body BMI, it's also what matters is that the type of weight. So if you are just fat or if you have the muscles. So it would be nice to have some kind of like a service that could recognize if the person's fitness level, so to speak, like a visual recognition or something like that, or some way to determine if you're actually the type of weight you have, if it's big muscles, which is great, or if it's just a fat that you want to lose, right? So I just gave you an example. Then what you want to do, you're not going to do this for the assignment, but you have to explain what you would have done. You would, in theory, you would deploy your chatbot. You don't need to do it, but you have to discuss which platform you're going to select to deploy your chatbot. And if you do that, if you were deploying the chatbot, you would have to use this Workspace URL and credentials. So see here, in here, this is for people who are interested in maybe after class, maybe after this class, right? You still have access to the course material, so you can go back and maybe you can do this. If you decide to deploy, then you go to credentials, and then in here you have to use this Workspace ID, and you have to use this piece, right? well, you'll be prompted for this information when you deploy. And if your chatbot is deployed, then you have this tab, improve. And in here, if your chatbot is deployed, it's going to store your conversation information, like which intents were hit during the conversation and which entities were identified. And here you could look at the weak understanding, which was not identified as it should have been, and you could use this information here to further train the bot. You could use this information here if you have it. Of course, I don't have it right now because I did not deploy this chatbot, right? I did not deploy this workspace, but I'm just telling you, in general, you could have information in here. Okay? So, danger zone. If you delete something, you cannot undo, right? Or in Elena's vocabulary, in my vocabulary, there is no recycle bin. Okay? If it's deleted, it's gone. So you should be saving, you should be making a backup as you work on assignment. And remember that, making one mistake, that's it. So you have to start early, because myself, I accidentally deleted something, I had to redo it. Yep. So you should be extra careful, you should allow yourself some time for this, right? And I put some more links here. This page, this is the asset exchange page, where some developers submitted their votes, and sometimes you can just export the JSON file and take a look. Well, you're not going to submit it for grading, but sometimes it's good to look at the example. It will give you some ideas, but what you are submitting has to be your work. It has to be your original chatbot, right? Okay, so let's see, do we have questions? Questions? Anybody? Anybody? So I guess we need a little pop-up quiz. Surprise quiz. Okay, let's see. Linesh, do you have anything to add to this?
No, Elena, I think you pretty much covered it all.
And what happens when somebody starts late, doing the work late? Guess what?
Well, you'll be stuck on the last weekend working on this, almost coming closer to the midnight.
Yeah. And
maybe not even submitting it. So, we want to start earlier, as soon as possible, as soon as you have got a handle on it, start working on it. Use the weekday evenings more than the weekends, I would say. I know it's very easy for us to, especially folks who are working, that, could reserve almost all the time, the assignment time to weekends. But in this case, where we are using a platform which is not very much under our control, I would strongly suggest that, we use the weekday evenings as much as possible.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, but the thing is, yes, if you could finish your hands-on piece, right, and then the weekend save it for the write-up part. But you want to have all your hands-on, and just in case the service is down for maintenance, you could just take screenshots that you could use for the write-up. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Eric makes an excellent point. That Eric says, I think we need some hands-on time and the walkthrough before we will have questions. Yes, well, yes, Eric, I agree with you. And this takes a lot of practice. And that's the reason, actually, in the announcement, it said to start to actually reading and the walkthrough before this WebEx. But the question and answer session does not end tonight. You can post your questions in a discussion. All right? I hope it helps because well, I realize it's a lot of information, but you have to sit down, you have to practice. You really have to practice. Yeah. So let's see. Anybody? Yelena, is Yelena still here? Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna stop sharing. All right, so let's see. Do you have questions? Questions? Going once, going twice. Okay. Is there a minimum of steps in the workflow that are required? Billy, this is an excellent question. Is there a minimum of steps? It depends on the application. But what does it say in the requirements? Does it say 5 scenarios? I would have to look it up. But you want to make sure that you cover the expected number of scenarios, right? Well, we say to go beyond the minimum. However, there is also a limit on how far you want to go because of the time constraint. You don't want to do something super, yes. But this is an excellent question. I like the question. Well, if you do something like this will be fine. Well, but this is maybe a lot because I kept on thinking, what can I do more to add to value to it? But yeah, but something like this is acceptable. Yeah. But you also want to include what is it possible to produce what a workflow? What do you mean a workflow? Well, after the bot is, oh, you mean if the chatbot is deployed? Yeah, you can still add to it. You still train. Yeah. Oh, how to get the diagram? Oh, the question is how to get the diagram. To do the diagram, I use the Draw.io tool, and you can save the diagram on your drive, right? You can save the diagram on your Google Drive, and then you can reopen it and modify it. The diagram, I use the Draw.io online interface. This is where I build it. And in an assignment, it gives you the option. You can use video if you have it, but if you don't use this, it's free. Okay? We don't build a diagram in the software. But what you will have to do is you will have to export the JSON file to submit because the teacher has to test your, yeah. And if you're using dates, if you're using dates entity, you want to specify what time zone you're in. Because I bet that if you're not in the Eastern time zone, when the instructor grades your work, she may see slightly different results. Okay? Anyhow, do we have questions? Is Yelena still online? Okay. This time I'm prepared for the unexpected. Hold on. So let's see, do we have more questions? Huh? Questions? Going once, going twice, going 3 times, going 4 times, going 5 times. Alright, so if you don't have any questions, then we're going to call it a night. And I'm going to end the recording.
Nice talk to you, Elena. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm gonna do, oops, where is that? Hold on. Is it it's still recording. Oh. Options. Oh no, where is it? Ooh. Finish.
Yeah.
I see what the problem is. I see the problem.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, hold on. Okay. Alright.